Okay, so we kick off a new week of football coverage on the Ourlads Football Network. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and coming up, talking about the Houston Texans with Cole Thompson of the Texans Wire. So the Houston Texans, yes, this is a team that has been knocking down the door the last few playoff seasons. Last season, things looked really good for them. The defense was better than ever. The confidence was there. Another first round win. And things really fell apart quickly in the matchup at Foxborough. CJ Stroud, we know the story by now. So there's a lot of talk going on, I'm sure, in Houston about the confidence or the lack thereof in CJ Stroud. So we're definitely going to talk to Cole about that, as well as what we normally do with these interviews at this time of year. We're going to take a look at the depth chart because it looks to me like the Texans are better on paper than they were last year. And to me, they just look like they're a competent quarterback away from being a Super Bowl championship team. They're 18-1 right now to win the Super Bowl. Let's see if I can pop up the numbers here. Let's see. Actually, these are the win totals. So Houston is actually one of those teams that sits between 9.5 and 10.5. They're over 9.5 minus 125. Also at over 10.5 plus 135. So they're ranging between 9 and 10 on the win total. They're the top pick to win the division as well. They should be. Jacksonville is not that far behind, though, even though Jacksonville is not getting the love that Houston is. Jacksonville, I think when we did our Jacksonville coverage, they were right around 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. So, yeah, they're not getting that Houston love. But you know what? I think part of that, and deservedly so, has to do with the fact that Houston's been there over the last few years and Jacksonville hasn't. So I think some people just want to see a little bit more proof that Jacksonville can do it again. And, of course, also they're going to get a little bit more a tough schedule and all that kind of stuff. Look, I disagree with all the I don't know if you want to say it, but I think they're being a little bit disrespected. But Houston's not. Houston is getting all the respect I think they deserve. And, again, it's all dependent upon CJ Stroud in my book. But we're going to find out more about the entire depth chart here in just a couple of minutes with Cole Thompson. And in the meanwhile, also just want to pop out a couple other things, just some housekeeping. James Pierce, as you can see here, is reporting the Falcons minicamp. Another ridiculous situation going on in the NFL, how this guy just allowed – I mean, look at what they did with James Pierce. So he's charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. He flees, all right? This is an NFL football player, all right? This is a first-round draft pick. This is a star rookie for an NFL football team that is fleeing and eluding police and resisting an officer with violence. And that's not all the bad stuff. Really, the bad stuff is the aggravated battery. So last month, he accepted a 1-year diversion program. Wow, tough plea, man, to have the charges dropped. That's sort of like me or you, you know, if they, I don't know, you know what, you got to go to detention. You got to go to summer school. That's what this is, a diversion program. Who are they kidding? Now, the league has not announced their conclusion, and they're going to find out about the discipline and all. But this guy is, I'm telling you, this guy has got to get suspended for 6 games, but they're going to give him 2. I don't even know if he's going to get suspended this year. But, I mean, once again, and the NFL is just a joke when it comes to these matters. You know, Rashid Rice is getting out of jail in a few days, and they're just going to, you know, sweep that under the rug. And we've talked about that before. That guy should be out of the NFL. That guy should be at least give him a 1-year suspension, and maybe it'll improve his maturity level and understanding that it's not all about him. But NFL just keeps, again, like everybody else, just sweeping it under the rug. So you keep doing that. Rashee Rice, we haven't heard the last of him getting into trouble. So we'll talk more about that in the coming months before we enter the season, because Rashee Rice will definitely be in the news more and more once he does attend a camp, and especially if he's hanging around training camp. Okay, so let's go ahead now and turn our attention to the Houston Texans for the primary part of this show tonight. And that means, once again, we're going to welcome in our resident Houston Texans analyst from the Texans Wire, Cole Thompson. Actually, I should say Mr. Cole Thompson. That's not Cole.
Greg, it's June, which means that there's nothing to talk about in the NFL, except there's always something to talk about in the NFL. Brendan Sorsby's going pro.
Yes,
there's Texans fans who right now are saying, look, we love CJ Stroud, but do we really love CJ Stroud enough to go ahead and not take a quarterback in the second round of the supplemental draft? I mean, we know how good Bernie Kosar turned out to be. Maybe we got our own Bernie Kosar coming on in, and he could be like the quarterback version of Chris Carter down in Houston and the savior for our program. It's good time. I was listening behind, backstage. I don't think you're entirely wrong. This is a really interesting team going into the year about where they kind of sit in the pecking order. Because I think if you just look at the entire roster and take CJ Stroud off, they're one of, if not the betting favorites in the AFC to go to the Super Bowl.
Yes.
But you have to throw the CJ Stroud conundrum into the conversation, which may be the reason why they don't get out of the divisional round for the umpteenth time and miss the AFC Championship game, something that they have yet to accomplish in their illustrious 25 years of being around.
Wow. We're getting there. 25 years. It's about time. Okay. So first I'm going to ask you, and I know we talked about it before, but just refresh everybody's minds and anybody who might have missed it. And we're not going to talk about it too long because I want to talk about it now, but I was talking about it. And we're going to be doing an AFC South preview on Friday. And so maybe get ahead of it here. What was for the fan base, like by halftime of the Patriot game, was the fan base like praying or maybe even expecting that Davis Mills would be coming into the game? Were they frustrated and angry that their coach stuck with one player and maybe just didn't have regard for the rest of the team just because he wanted to stick with CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I think it was split more so in favor of why didn't you turn to Davis Mills, because of good God, do we have to see another interception? We just need to cut down on the turnovers and we're going to be good. But the bottom line is that CJ was the main culprit of the loss in Foxborough. I think that we can all come to that agreement, but you can't put it all on Stroud. Sure. Again, it was a fourth down play where Pop Douglas breaks on off of the nickel defender and he's into the end zone for a touchdown. There was the big Kayshon Boutte touchdown. There was the fumble by Woody Marks inside of the red zone. They're one of their best opportunities to score that day. So even when you talk about all of the negatives that came with Stroud, which there were a lot of, there were more issues than just that. I didn't think the offensive line played efficiently enough. The wide receivers. Remember, they didn't have Nico Collins in that game, right. So they lose him. Yep. And then the other thing that was really important, Greg, is that their second best weapon throughout the entire year was Dalton Schultz, the tight end.
Yep.
And he left in the first quarter with an injury. So now you're putting a lot of pressure on Jaden Higgins, who was a fine player last year, but not supposed to be your number one weapon. Jalen Knoll and tight ends that are really just kind of depth pieces to kind of pick and prod this thing together. Oh, and on top of that, you can't run the football efficiently to save your bleeping life. I mean, that's just the bottom line of where we are. So it's like they were already pigeonholed in that standpoint. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't take the ball out of CJ's hands. They were down by enough scores. It just went from bad to worse. It felt like that the writing was on the wall. You could throw Davis Mills in and the comeback still isn't going to be there. It's the culmination, though, of knowing that you had to rely on those 3 turnovers and your defense really bailing you out of trouble against Pittsburgh. And then you get another mulligan and you do the exact same thing, but it's way worse this time around because you have the pick six involved.
Yeah, I think what it was it seemed like CJ, because of those turnovers in Pittsburgh, his turnovers in that game just made it look like, wait a second here. We've seen this before. And again, I don't think the fan base wouldn't have minded if they just would have said, you know what, just like in hockey, we got to change a goalie. We just saw that with Carolina. Hey, let's just try something. We just can't do nothing. And he did nothing. And I think that was the frustrating part, because I agree with everything you just said. And that's the reason why CJ Stroud deserves this season to prove, because I just said it. And I agree. I believe this is true, that they are a better team now on paper. They can run the football apparently because of the better offensive line, a better running game. If they can have healthier luck as far as the injuries are concerned. But then would you have to agree that this has got to be it? This is his chance. If everybody's healthy and he doesn't produce, it has to fall on him then.
To a degree, there's the reality is, Greg, is that this as well as I do. It's a lot easier to get a new offensive coordinator than a new quarterback. That's the bottom line. Now, if everything else is working, the offensive line is holding its blocks, the run game is efficient. You went out and you brought in a guy that is known for being a pulverizer inside the red zone with David Montgomery. If you add all that together and it works, and you're still watching CJ just miss open targets that lead to picks, then it's on CJ. But I'm not sure that it is going to be entirely just you punting and saying we're starting over, because there's two main elements here. The Texans are a franchise that I think really does embrace the fact that they are a defensive first mentality, and they would love to be able to pay for as many defensive players from that number one unit a season ago to be back for another year and then 2 more years after that. They have Kamari Lassiter, who is, in my opinion, a bona fide top 10 cornerback already in his own right. Opposite of it, already number 2 cornerback in the NFL, and Derek Smith Jr. for my money, that is going to get paid this offseason. And if you know anything about D'Amico Ryans, they will find the money to make sure that they're paying for both him and Derek Smith Jr. Kalen Bullock is a guy who I think if they don't want to live without, if they had to, they would figure out a way. That's why they used a 5th-round pick on Kamari Ramsey, the kid out of USC. There's been conversations about potentially making some moves of, bringing back Jalen Smith a little bit if you need to, maybe working Jalen Reed a little bit more with the first team unit. They feel confident that they'll be able to replace him, but they don't really want to. And then also, they have Danielle Hunter doing these 1-year deals where he's very happy because he consistently is upping his ante of annual salary and guaranteed money, but eventually they want to pay for him. So it's like, if you constantly continue to pay for the defensive side of the ball, you can't just go out and say, well, Baker Mayfield's a free agent, let's go pay him a lot of money. It's a give and take moment of, do I want to watch this defense that has been such a terror lose some pieces and hopefully we can continue to develop and we pay for the quarterback? Or do I go for the quarterback and just keep him on his rookie contract because they got another year left and just run it back with the same defense? So Texans are in a really weird spot when it comes to the CJ Stroud conversation. The best thing that could happen is CJ plays well enough to where he gets a new contract. And you do believe that even if you don't go to the Super Bowl this year, let's say you go to the AFC Championship game and you lose because of a game-winning field goal or something like that. It's a very low-scoring affair. It's not a great look because of, again, it's another year of this defense that is going to be historic wasted. Yeah. But you're taking another step forward. I think that the crazy part is the Texans are going to be too good to be able to draft a premier name. So they're going to have draft compensation to go up and add somebody. And they're not going to spend the money when it comes to getting another quarterback to come on into the building. Therefore, they're just kind of in limbo, which is not a great place to be when you feel like that the quarterback is the one thing holding you back.
Well, we'll find out. We've got more than enough time. You cover college football, all this talk about this quarterback class, but that's never a guarantee, as we know.
No.
The good news is there's so many possibilities that the law of averages tell you that, 3 to 5 guys should be coming out that are worthy of the top, say, 30, 35 picks of the draft. And if that happens, as we know, the more the numbers game, then the better opportunity will be for teams like Houston to maybe be able to even just move up a little bit to get their guy. But we don't want to go there if you're a Houston fan. We want CJ Stroud to succeed. And so that's why I'm saying, I think if the team is healthy and the team is firing on all cylinders, and as long as CJ Stroud goes out there and doesn't do anything stupid, then I think Houston is not going to lose these types of games in the postseason. I think they're going to win them. Unless, like you just said, maybe they go mano-a-mano with a really good team in the championship game, and it just happens that one team loses. And then that's great. you found your quarterback. You didn't win it, but that's okay. It wasn't his fault. Let's just do it again, give him the contract, and now we're kind of set for the rest of, hopefully, the next several years with your franchise quarterback in place. Because at the offensive line, I want to start there, because the offensive line, we've been talking a lot about that the last few years, deserving so, as far as how bad it's been. But now, finally, it looks like last year, baby steps, and this year, it looks like for the first time, there's a little bit more talent now on paper for them to put together a halfway, decently average offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got to stay healthy is probably the big key asset here. But there was a trait that Nick Caley wanted when discussing on it. He was coming back for another year. There was a trait that they said that was necessary for his offense to work, and that was you had to be a great run blocker. And every move made this offseason, there was one common theme. We are going to be a physical team in the trenches, and we're going to pound the rock. That is the game plan. And you look at almost every single move they had, offensive line to the running back room, it was made because of they want to be that type of mentality team. Ed Ingram last year was a top 10 run blocker on the interior offensive line in college football, according to Pro Football Focus. Braden Smith, for years, has been one of the best right tackles when it comes to run blocking during his tenure in Indianapolis. Wyatt Teller has been known for being a mauler as a run blocker. You bring in David Montgomery. David Montgomery has 33 rushing touchdowns, and I believe 19 of them inside of the 20, inside the red zone. He is known for that physicality. The Texans have 33 rushing touchdowns as a team since CJ Stroud entered the league. So you're getting a guy to replace him in that standpoint. Keelan Rutledge comes on in from Georgia Tech, where that was a team coached by a former all ACC offensive lineman in Brent Key. I mean, like the intangibles that they were going after this year when it came to building this offensive line and building really just this offensive identity was, we want to limit the number of throws that CJ has to open up the ability to trust that we can run the football efficiently. And we really like what we have with the guy in Woody Marks as a number 2, but we knew we need to get somebody who could be a little bit more physical inside of the red zone. They got that guy, I think, in Montgomery, and every offensive lineman better be willing to block his ass off and knock the crap out of somebody. The way that I described it was the guys that were brought in for CJ Stroud and protection for the Texans offensive line, they're the type of dudes that won't start a bar fight, but they'll be the ones to finish it. Like that's the mentality of what you have kind of blocking up front this year. And that's a good thing, because I think it was necessary to get those type of guys this year. Yeah. Because it did feel like there was a disconnect last season. They had good finesse guys at times. They needed that road mauler mentality, and they have that now. Now the question is, how quickly can everyone gel together? Are you going to deal with injuries? Braden Smith has dealt with injuries throughout his entire career, especially the last 4 years. Teller took a step back last season. When they're on the field, they're really good, which I think is going to be a blessing in disguise. But again, it's so important that you have those guys that are supposed to be starting, because it's still going to be a battle for Keelan Rutledge at center. He's also working in right guard. It's still going to be a battle for Evan Brown. They didn't bring him on in just to be a backup. They brought him in to compete. They think that Ed Ingram is the right guy for the job. That's why they paid him $37 million. But, you know, they're willing to make a switch. I mean, they did that with Shaq Mason back in 2024 because they realized how big of a liability after the one season he had. So, you know, it's all going to gel, but on paper, the identity of that offensive line is a night and day difference and a 180 flip from what we saw last year.
Well, let's talk about these draft picks too, starting on the offensive line, because I don't have to tell Houston fans, but there were some questionable draft picks and ones that definitely made you scratch your head. And the one at the top of the list, we're going to talk about this in a minute or two, just happens to come from the school that I have rooted for my whole life. So I know him very well. And it happens to be Michigan. But let's go to the 4th round kid. How do you pronounce this kid's name?
Fabechi Weewu. So it literally is exactly how it sounds like in the SpongeBob episode. Weewu, weewu, weewu.
Well, that makes it easy. Okay. So Fabechi Weewu.
Yes.
Ourlads, at least was one service, since the only one we care about here, graded him as a UDFA, and he gets drafted in round 4, even though there were 2 picks that the Texans drafted that they were able to get later in their class that Ourlads graded a few rounds higher. So sometimes there's that give and take, and that's why sometimes you just go, okay, it all works out. But this kid in the 4th round, what's his fit? What are you looking at here?
The story plays a really big role. It's not the entire role, but I do think it does play a role when it comes to Nick Caserio drafting. The way how they go about their business and how they build up their repertoire and how they're able to go ahead and prove themselves. Weewu was a kid that walked on at North Texas, and he immediately caught fire. I mean, the second that he walked on at the program, he was already their best offensive lineman. He gets a scholarship to go to Oklahoma, and the second he gets at Oklahoma, he does not miss a beat playing all 3 interior offensive line spots. So position flexibility was a really big selling point for them. He saw action at center. He saw action at guard. He was part of an offense that 1 year won 10 games underneath Brent Venables. The next year was really kind of struggling, but he was the anchor. And then this past season, he was arguably their best offensive lineman en route to go into the college football playoffs. So he's a very good run blocker. He is physical. He is good low center gravity. Does not miss when it comes to footwork and hand placement. I do think there are some limitations when it comes to his pass protection, but they really like the fact that he had to fight his way from starting off at North Texas to earning a scholarship to getting a deal for Oklahoma to not missing a beat going from the level of competition that you see at the American and Conference USA level all the way up to the SEC, and really being an anchor for a mobile quarterback in John Mateer this past year to be able to trust they could have an efficient run game. So he was one of my favorite day 3 picks for the Texans. Okay. I think that the fact that you just kind of doubled down and said, we don't really care about what is their position. We'll figure it out when we figure it out along the way. Just get him in the building. We'll work him out. He has seen reps at guard on both sides of the offensive line. I think he is going to be a guard at the NFL level. But he is a player that you're not expecting to start this season.
Sure.
Maybe you don't even expect him to start at all. But they do feel confident that he will be a decent depth piece.
And they need that. Again, injuries are going to happen. You know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then their 1st round pick. So I know there were some people who really were high on Rutledge. And then there were some people who thought that he wasn't a 1st round draft pick. But I think once you get late to the 1st round, if you're considered like a 1st or 2nd or 3rd, or like a late 1st or even an early 3rd round draft pick, all bets are off in my mind. You can get drafted late 1st, and I don't really mind. I don't criticize anybody for it. So what about Rutledge? And you mentioned physicality definitely is a big deal there. No question about it, but very experienced, as we know. Somebody that did not have, I don't believe, experience as a center in college until he was able to demonstrate after college, at the practices that, hey, I can do this if I need to play center. Is this what you're going to see at camp? I know that everybody's, going to compete for playing time in different positions, but do you believe when it really comes down to it that it's going to be Rutledge versus Andrews at center?
For now, I would say so. Rutledge is going to work every spot, though. They're going to work him at both guard spots. They're going to work him at center, and I think that's fair. I agree with you to a certain extent. I thought Rutledge, and you're kind of nitpicking at this point. I thought Rutledge, if you took him at pick number 28 versus trading on up to pick number 26 and giving away a 3rd round pick, was a better option. I just personally think that from the trade value standpoint, but I'm not a GM, and my job's not going to be represented by what happens with this type of pick. Here's what I will say. If you flip the 1st and the 2nd round pick, they're both A+. I think that nobody would argue that. A lot of Texans fans were flabbergasted that Caden McDonald was available, and then they trade on up to get him. So if you just took the 2 slots and said, hey, we trade on up to 26 to go get Caden McDonald, and then 10 picks later we took Keelan Rutledge, everybody I think would be on board.
You're right.
I think they would have knocked the 2 first round picks out of the park because they're both big and they're both mean and they're both exactly what are necessary for the offensive line. Rutledge is, again, one of these guys who the way that Brent Key described him was he is just a psychopath. And honestly, that's what's necessary for this team is that psychopathic mentality. This was a guy that got in a car wreck and shattered his leg, and everyone brought up, no. Like, I will play with a broken leg. He had to come out of the game against Clemson, that upset win this past year at Bobby Dodd Stadium, because he was profusely bleeding. and he got in the ref's face and he was screaming at him, "Don't you dare take me off this field because if I'm screaming." Like, my face is just always this red. They're like, "No, it's blood. We can tell.
Yeah.
Get off the field and get it fixed before we let you back out here." Like, that's the type of player that you're getting. Great run blocker. Comes from an offense that is very much a run-oriented system in college. I think everyone knows at this point with what you have with Haynes King and Jamal Haynes in your backfield, you were supposed to be a running-oriented offense. He's a very, very diligent worker. He is a good, stable, low center of gravity, not afraid to go ahead and get lower than you type of person. Kind of did the same kind of thing as Fabeju Iwubu, went from Middle Tennessee State to Georgia Tech. Killed at Georgia Tech, became an All-American. An All-ACC player. Brent Key said that by the time that he retires, he believes that that'll be the greatest offensive lineman he's coached at Georgia Tech. So very high praise from the guy that was within the last 2 years. The center thing is going to be really interesting because I think the Texans would love nothing more than to say Keelan Rutledge is starting center week 1 over Jake Andrews. Because then what you have is then you have stability with Wyatt Teller, you have stability with Braden Smith, and you brought in the center and Keelan Rutledge and you called it a day. And so that's a win. But until you see it, it's just kind of tongue-in-cheek. He's got to earn the job. And I do think that the thing about the Texans, especially with Cole Popovich as the offensive line coach, you're not just going to get thrown out there because you're a first-round pick. Now the Texans would love to be able to say he's a first-round pick, he's starting. But they want the 5 best offensive linemen out there.
Yeah.
And again, this is a guy who is still learning how to play the position on the fly while learning a brand new offensive personnel set underneath Nick Caley. Now, there are some things that are very poignant that come from Brent Key's offense and what Buster Faulkner was running last year that will work at the NFL. I mean, that will work for a guy like a Nick Caley's offense. So the conversation, the dialect is not that different, but still you're learning how to play an NFL offense while also learning how to play a new position. By the season's end, starter, I would say. But if Buffalo comes in week 1 and Jake Andrews is still the starter, it wouldn't shock me.
Okay, so it sounds, before we get to the rest of the picks, it's really starting to sound to me, I mean, I think this is a good thing, that the team wants to start changing their identity on the offensive side to being a physical, run-oriented team.
They're going to try to, I would say, limit CJ Stroud to under 25 throws per game and trust what they got in David Montgomery and Woody Marks. That would be my inclination of what they want to be this year. Now, that doesn't mean they want CJ not to throw because they do really like what they have in Jaden Higgins. They think that Jalen Noel could have a good year. Lewis Bond, the kid out of Boston College, has been turning heads at OTAs and minicamp. I don't think he's going to have a big role this season, but bygones be bygones. Things can happen. They expect Tank Dell hopefully back in some capacity this year. They got 5 tight ends. Then they like 4 of them as receiving threats, and they got a 5th one that they really like. So they're going to still throw the football, but the identity is all about we're going to have great run blocking up front, so that way we can turn what's supposed to be a 1st and 10 into a 2nd and 6 and make our offense much more dynamic rather than it be a 2nd and 8 or a 2nd and 9, and we have to throw the football on this play.
And all you have to do, of course, is take a look at the acquisitions of Moreau in free agency and Klein. No matter how much I can sit here and I still can't even believe that they took him in the 2nd round. But fact of the matter is, both of those players, the one thing that you lean upon them is their ability to block first and foremost. Yeah. And that is something that, again, if they're going to have that identity, then they might have looked at Klein. I'm just guessing that, hey, this is what we're doing. And we need to, I don't care where we draft the kid. We like him. We feel he's going to be a big part of this offense going forward. And we also believe, I'm sure, that we're going to be able to improve upon some of the issues that he had last year at Michigan, even though he was honorable mention, which he never deserved. The fact is that there's a lot of other things that I'm sure they liked about him that they feel that they can get out of him. Yeah.
And I say this tongue in cheek. I don't say this because I have facts. Like I say, so I want to preface that because if it gets clipped and I got Nick breathing down my ass, I mean, like, it's a different thing. My philosophy after watching his last 3 drafts is Nick Caserio goes in on Thursday, and he throws up a board and he says, these 40 players are going to be Houston Texans. These are the players that we're picking from.
Okay.
And we don't care about where we pick them. We don't care. We got to move up, move back, a little bit this way, a little bit that way. These players are Houston Texans. That is the game plan, and we'll figure it out along the way.
Okay.
And Marlon Klein fit that bill. Exactly. Now, Marlon Klein was not going to be available for them in round 5. Now, I've come to that acceptance. I think a lot of Texans fans, they don't want to hear that because of, again, what could have been wasted. But there was a run at tight end. There was a massive run at tight end starting on day 2. Nate Borkature really kind of set that thing in motion for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then you just saw name after name after name after name. The problem that you have, I think, when it comes to Marlon Klein is he still is an unproven product, and he still is a very unpolished product. Mm-hmm. This was a kid that came on over from Germany that was learning how to play tight end in Atlanta, Georgia, before he went to Michigan. And while at Michigan, he was still learning how to play the position. And the problem that he really had when he was at Michigan was when you're learning how to play the position, at some point, reps are going to have to matter. And he was just blocked for years while trying to carve out a role on the team. Because if you got to remember, they had A.J. Barner, a part of that national championship team. And then they had Luke Schoonmaker. And so both of them were out there for a lot of 12 and 13 personnel looks. So he couldn't break his way on in. Then they brought in Colston Loveland. And Colston Loveland was the best receiver for the team that couldn't throw the football. And they didn't have a good quarterback in 2024. So that was your best target, and he ended up having a big role. Then you bring in Bryce Underwood, and you bring in Chip Lindsey as your offensive coordinator, and they just don't mesh really well together.
No.
And they become such a very run-oriented team that you improve from the run blocking standpoint, but you're still very limited as a route runner and concepts and being able to win one-on-one battles. And he had his moments. He definitely flashed. I want to give credit where credit's due. Klein flashed, but flash doesn't work for a second-round pick is the problem, especially one that is a premier pick. And then there was rumors that they could have traded on back and maybe moved into the 70s and taken him there. I don't know if they would have liked it. I just look at the things that were necessary. They want to get another tight end to compete alongside with Foster Moreau, Cade Stover, and Brevin Jordan. They wanted to get a tight end desperately. Like everyone knew that. They could have gone with a better receiving tight end. There were names that were very much still on the board. Oscar Delp from Georgia, I thought, was a perfect fit in that standpoint. They could have gone with the blocking first tight end that still is a very good receiving threat in Sam Roush from Stanford that I thought would have been a perfect fit for them at number 59. They could have moved up in the 3rd round to go take Marlon Klein because they still need to go get a linebacker because they're probably going to let Henry To'oTo'o walk next offseason. And Anthony Hill was a player that was a really interesting fit that was available on day 2 that a lot of Texans fans were kind of salivating over, saying if he's there, they got to make the pick. It's just they took Klein at 59 and didn't have a second thought about it. And so now there's, I think, an unyielding amount of pressure for him to come on in and prove that he belongs almost instantaneously.
Sure.
Because of what you could have gotten instead. And that's so unfair to him. But the reality is that this is the NFL. And when you're a top 60 selection, they expect things out of you, like almost immediately. Now, the good news is that you have Foster Moreau. Yeah. And I thought Foster Moreau was one of the more underappreciated moves of any team this offseason, because the Texans, I think, are going to be very much living in 12 and 13 personnel this year and running a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. And Moreau, I think, does give you the best option as a blocker. And I do think that Klein can be a factor on 13 and 12 personnel as a blocking tight end. But at the same time, at some point, there's going to be the conversation of,
sure,
did we really use a top 60 pick on a guy who's made 9 catches and only seen 30% of snaps this year offensively? Like, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And it takes time, as we know, with these tight ends. And then speaking of tight ends and taking time, Brevin Jordan, a 21 pick, and I know he's had some injury concerns, but seems to have really had a nice offseason. And I guess, what is there, a battle now between Jordan and Stover at training camp for that final spot? Do you think they're going to keep only 4 tight ends?
I think they're going to keep 4. Moreau's not a lock. I mean, I think he's a lock, but he's technically not a lock just because of 1-year contract. There's so much intrigue with that 4th tight end spot. Because on one hand, what you can do is just say Cade Stover is going to be a fullback. And if you make Cade Stover more of an H-back, fullback type role, then the role is going to be a lot different than what he was already playing the last few years. He kind of played a little bit of an H-back role at times at Ohio State, so transition wouldn't be that bad. But in my opinion, the second best receiving tight end that they have is Brevin Jordan. But Brevin Jordan also has dealt with back-to-back season-ending injuries and has only played 2 games in the last 2 years. So that's kind of where you're like in that lost area of what do you get from him. So if they go with like a 3 tight end H-back role, I think Stover has the nod. If they go with 4 tight ends, I think that Brevin Jordan may have the nod. I think the best thing that could happen for the Texans, especially with that spot, with those 2, is they both ball out throughout all of spring training. And then they wait for a team that needs a tight end to go ahead and make a phone call. That I think that they would love to have that. Because again, Nick Caserio is like the king of getting rid of players that he's going to cut for 6th, 7th round picks.
Okay.
And just eating the cap and then figuring out a way to go ahead and utilize those picks to get who he wants next season. So that could be an easy way for them to go ahead and say, cool, we're getting this dude and we're trading this dude and we're adding this guy in. And lo and behold, we're going to be good.
Okay. You mentioned Bond. So it looks like we know who the 5 receivers are going to be, especially when Tank is healthy. So Bond, is he definitely number 6? I mean, you don't usually spend draft picks and then just let him go or even put him on the practice squad. So is that what you're seeing? Or maybe Bond starts the season. One of the other receivers also starts the season active. Tank maybe is still on PUP. I got no idea. You'll update me on that. How do you see Lewis Bond's role here?
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is like Bond is at a point of where the hype does not warrant the amount of conversation that we're having. And that's not his fault. That's a couple people on Texans Twitter that want to go ahead and say that this guy's gonna be better than Jalen Nolan, better than Tank Dell, better than all. It's like, all right, whatever.
Okay.
Again, he's a cheaper option than what you got with Justin Watson. He's an option that you kind of don't know enough about, where Xavier Hutchinson, you kind of maybe are like, this is who he is. This is the ceiling. So if he doesn't have a good camp, we can do what we did last season with John Mechie and move him and hopefully get like a 6th round pick back in return. He has stood out. I mean, fair is fair. He's also stood out going up against the 2nd and 3rd team defense.
Sure.
So again, context matters a lot. And that's where we are right now, I think, when it comes to the Lewis Bond chatter, is he will be a special teams guy. He would be a wide receiver number 6. I think that, again, the benefactor that he has is the Texans really loved his tape. I mean, they loved it because this is a guy that did not get invited to the combine, but they still said, we don't care. We have seen enough of him on tape to believe that he is going to come on in here and be a difference maker for us. So having that inside track is a massive win for him, but he's a 6th round pick for a reason. And there's going to be a long battle between the last 4 guys trying to make the spot. And honestly, right now, the whole way this can be solved pretty quickly, Greg, is what's going to be Tank Dell's status. Is Tank going to be limited once again as he was throughout all of OTAs and all minicamp, throughout training camp, and then they put him on the PUP list to begin the year, or they put him on the IR week 1 and he misses the first 4 games? Okay, well, you need a roster spot. So then Higgins, Collins, Knoll, Hutchinson, Watson, and Lewis Bond make it. And then what they're going to do afterwards, they're going to have the conversation of Hudson, Watson, and Bond now have 4 weeks to get their act together.
Before we move over to the defense, anything else on offense, including any of the undrafted free agents that have stepped out, made a name for themselves, anything like that? Anything that we need to be keeping an eye on ahead of training camp?
I mean, naturally, you can look at probably anyone on the offensive line. James Neal has multiple years of starting experience from Iowa State. Sam Higgins has starting experience when he was at North Dakota State, both at tackle. So I think that's going to be a really interesting battle of, let's just say, they trade away Jake Andrews, or if there is an injury to Trent Brown, or Braden Smith has to start the year off on the IR. Does that lead to you opening up a door for one of them to make it? Wide receiver is going to be a very tight battle. There's always a name that could probably make it. I really liked Daniel Sabakowitz's tape from Illinois State.
Okay.
The kid was a human highlight reel for 3 years with the Redbirds. I mean, like, I think he led FCS back-to-back years in receiving yards. I think this last season he led the FCS in receptions. He was awesome. I actually had to watch him in Nashville at the FCS National Championship, and Montana State would have won that game outright by 30 if they didn't have Skowronich out there. So
okay,
he'll be a fun one. Noah Whittington is probably the name that everyone should be focusing on because of that running back's position. You have David Montgomery, you have Woody Marks, and then it's just kind of open. Jawar Jordan did come back last season. He was fully healthy, and he did make an impact in one game where he had 100 rushing yards. So credit where credit's due. But I'm not going to guarantee that he makes the roster. They could still bring in another running back if they want to. Yeah. They still have British Brooks on this team that is fighting for a role. Maybe he is looked at as a fullback though, more than he is more than a running back. So that could lead to his role kind of being thrown to the wayside.
Okay.
But Whittington was a guy that averaged over 6 yards a play when he was in college at Oregon, and he comes from a major program that was able to play efficiently in the Big Ten, and they went to the college football playoff semifinal and they won 2 games, and Whittington was a factor in those games. So I thought it was really interesting to see a guy that a lot of people thought would go middle of day 3, end up as an undrafted free agent. There's going to be a potential role for him. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Especially if you're going to wind up being one of those teams we talked about where you're really going to emphasize physicality, the run game. You better have a competent number 2, number 1, if you know what I'm saying. Because Woody Marks, his role is going to stay the same, right? He really came into the league as a guy that was really going to be more of a third down specialist, receiver, that sort of thing. Woody's job was never going to be, hey, I'm the number 1 guy here. I'm assuming if Montgomery gets hurt, they'd prefer to have another running back that kind of starts the game and Marks stays in his role.
If Montgomery were to get hurt, the first phone call would be to Woody Marks. Because Woody was weird because, like, you look on one hand and you say to yourself, yeah, he didn't have an elite season, but he's a 4th-round pick and he still rushed for over 700 yards and he still was a factor in the passing game. They drafted him because of his pass-catching skills at Mississippi State and USC. So they want to be a pass-catching running back that does add value as a secondary option. Montgomery's supposed to be the guy. I mean, like, if everything went according to plan last year, you would have had Joe Mixon as your lead back, and he would have been setting the standard, and you would have gone immediately right after over to Woody Marks as your number 2. And so instead what they did was they went with Nick Chubb, and Chubb kind of showed everybody, my best years are behind me.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. And we have to go with the running back that gives us the best chance to win. And Marks had his moments that were really good. And Marks has moments where, we heard that he was in the injury tent. And Marks probably left the field 3 or 4 times a game to where it was like, is he coming on back? Because he's better suited as a number 2. I mean, like, just calling it as is. Yeah. Teams need quality number 2 running backs. And I think that you have that in a guy like Woody Marks. But you don't want to see him carrying the football 22, 23 times a game. You want him touching the football probably anywhere between 12 to 15 times in some capacity at the most.
All right. Defensively, and by the way, I just want to let B-Drum R know that we go live 5 days a week. Tuesday is the only day of the week we tend to go in the evening. I'll talk more about our schedule a little bit later on when we're done with the interview. Okay, so on defense, you mentioned Caden McDonald, and I say this all the time, and we just even kind of talked about it, where there were some picks that were chosen later that could have gone higher as far as value, and vice versa. So I always tell my viewers, just wait until the draft is over and then see what the players you got. And if you like the players you got, don't worry about where they were drafted. And so when you said what you said about Caden McDonald and the switch with Rutledge, it made perfect sense. And that was actually one of the things that when you're looking at we always talk about that cinch 1st-round draft pick. Everybody knows that was the perfect team and player, and we all predicted it. I think that's probably the same thing with McDonald. When he was still on the board for Houston in round 2, or when they moved up to get him a couple of spots, it just made perfect sense, and they must have been just ecstatic to get him there.
No, I mean, I think if you look back at mock drafts, somebody did a database of this. the most mocked player in the first round outside of the top pick of Fernando Mendoza to the Las Vegas Raiders was Caden McDonald to the Houston Texans in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, like everyone just like said, you know what, screw it, it's going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
So they definitely, they knew that they had to jump New York. Like that's one that I can tell you right now that New York was very much set on taking Caden McDonald to be the Dexter Lawrence replacement up the middle. And so they knew they had to jump. I get, while you did give up you gave up a third round pick to move up 2 spots. This is one to where, again, the rich get richer on the defense. The thing about the Texans, and I very much nitpick when it comes to defense. I do, because of at some point you just got to trust the process. But the Texans don't spend money on defensive tackle. Like they have bargain bin shop for years when it comes to defensive tackle. Whether it was they brought in Tim Settle, or they brought in Mario Edwards Jr. They took a flyer on Sheldon Rankins and it ended up panning on out. And Tommy Togiai was a player claimed off waivers. They have never been aggressive in this regime underneath Nick Caserio with getting themselves stability at defensive tackle long term, or going out and adding in like a premier guy in free agency. They just haven't done that. Like Danico Autry, again, was like a tweener player that worked as a 4-eye technique to a 5 technique on the outside. So they would shift him inside from time to time. But for the most part, he was playing off at the edge more than he was playing on the inside as a situational pass rusher. So I give them a lot of credit for going out and making a move like Caden McDonald. I also give D'Amico Ryans a lot of credit for going with a guy that is completely different from the mold of what he is so accustomed to utilizing. The thing about the defensive line for the Texans, they like going with more speedy, agile, slimmer defensive tackles. They just do. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's the way they go about things. You know who doesn't fit that mold? A 333-pound defensive tackle that is known for being a run stuffer. Yeah. And for basically just swallowing up interior offensive lines, and was really good at it at Ohio State, playing in a pro-style defense underneath a guy that spent decades in the NFL and had a relationship with Nick Caserio when he was in New England in Matt Patricia. Like, I think a lot of people forget that those ties were together. And not only was he one of the best run defenders in college football last year, he was a great pass rusher because he just would swallow up linemen and get in the quarterback's face. So he's going to be a tweener player and a situational type guy, but it's a guy to where I think that the Texans want to add that extra oomph. Because if you really think about it for a second, Greg, the thing that has been not a pain's not the right word, but the thing that has been such a confusing thing for me has been, not confusing thing, has been such a problem at times for the Texans is, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to block Will Anderson Jr. All right, so now we got to worry about just Danielle Hunter. Okay, well, we're going to only block Danielle Hunter. So now I got to worry about Will Anderson Jr. Do you want your quarterback to be crushed by Caden McDonald up the middle?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we got to block Caden McDonald up the middle.
Sure.
So now both of our all-pro caliber defensive ends that are very handsomely paid to go kill the quarterback are going to be available to go kill the quarterback. I think that that's what makes this such a unique find and such a good find.
Okay. Also at linebacker, they added 2 guys, Woodaz in round 4, Fisher in round 7. And Fisher was one of those players I talked about. He could have gone as high as round 4, yet they were able to get him in round 7. So talk about both of those linebackers and where you see them fit, because are they going to get an opportunity to be the first guy they call upon if there is a substitution or an injury at linebacker?
I won't go first, but they're going to have an opportunity. Fisher was a guy that I think really fits the mold of like a special teams ace for Frank Ross. And for some reason, Frank Ross, like every single year, just gets his linebacker.
Yeah.
Like, they love Frank here. I don't know a single person that in the media and in the public eye doesn't like Frank. He's just a very well-liked guy at special teams. He does a really good job with the media. Just credit to Frank Ross. But like they always just draft like a linebacker that they just think is going to be a really good fit, like on kickoffs and punt punt situations. And that's probably is Fisher, who is a smaller frame linebacker that came on in from JMU, but ended up being the anchor and an All-American linebacker for Bryant Haynes, who won the Assistant Coach of the Year award, the Boros Award, this past season in college football for having arguably the most complete defense in the sport at a program that I don't think gets enough credit because of we focus so much in on what Fernando Mendoza meant to that offense and what he meant to that team that we don't
Sure.
look at what that defense was. Woodaz is a guy that came on in to Clemson as a safety. They brought him on down to that to linebacker. He is still very good in coverage. He is very sneakily athletic. The word that was utilized by Nick Caserio was he is very, very reactive and reactionary. And I think that's a good thing of where you want him to play linebacker. Woodaz this year, I think, would have an opportunity to compete for reps. Now with EJ Speed dealing with the injury, that's going to have him out for, if not the entire season, 90% of the season. So that's a good sign there. And again, I think the reason that they brought him on in was to see what he could be if they are to watch Henry To'oTo'o walk in free agency this offseason. So that's a guy that they really do like. Fisher's role is going to be interesting because the Texans are one of those teams that run 2 linebacker sets more than anybody else. Like, they very much love running a nickel-based defense. And Fisher's the Mike. You just paid your Mike linebacker and Azeez Al-Shaair a new 3-year contract. He's not getting taken off the field unless he has to.
Sure.
So Woodaz, I think, would get more playing time right now. But they're going to have an open battle for that last spot. You know, they really like Jake Hummel coming on in from Baltimore. Jake Hansen's been there for years, so he understands the defense. He is a fan favorite and a coach's favorite. There was a lot of praise for Jamal Hill and his adaptability of learning the defense and how he has continuously progressed. So, you know, there's definitely going to be that role. The other thing that I don't think is brought up enough is if they really want to do this, they could have moved Jalen Petrie on into the linebacker spot for a play or two and have this be like kind of a dime package where they bring in either Jalen Smith or they bring Kamari Ramsey down and then he plays in like that nickel position. So it's like kind of like a dollar linebacker like Deion Buchanan used to play back in the day. There's a lot of ways they get creative with it. I don't think Woodaz or Fisher is going to be an immediate contributor, but by, I would say, October, you should feel confident that they're really caught up on the defense. They feel really good about the roles they can play. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to trust that they're going to add in value if we throw them in for a play or two.
What's the training camp battle going to be as far as that position, that first guy off the bench? Who's he going to be against?
I think it's an open battle right now because EJ Speed was that guy. Like EJ Speed far and away was just like, we're throwing him out there and he'll be fine. Yeah, you look at all 5 names. I think every single one of them is going to have a shot. Like, it's a cop-out answer, but it's so early, and you have 2 guys that are known for being special teamers, and you got 2 guys that are rookies, and you got a third guy that's just kind of there. It's like, all right, we're going to figure this out along the way. We're going to do this together.
Okay, and in the secondary, you mentioned already Kamari Ramsey, so he becomes part of that secondary. What did you think about that pickup? Because we talked about the team needing to add a number 2 nickel. And it looks like Kamari is going to play that role among others. And I also want to throw in the fact that Colin Wright, Ourlads had graded him as a potential 5th-round draft pick, and the team was able to get him after the draft.
Colin Wright's a really, really fun player at Stanford this past year. Very interested to see what his role is going to be. He's going to probably go up against Jamarcus Ingram for that last cornerback spot. I genuinely can see, or if you were to ask me today, who is the undrafted free agent that I think would make the team, I would go with probably Colin Wright and Noah Whittington. Those would be my top 2 answers. But Ramsey's a really interesting player because of, again, he can play that big nickel role. You can try him out at safety. I think it would work. I don't think it would be great, but it could work. Something about USC defensive players underneath Danton Lynn that the Texans just really like, because last season they took Jalen Smith and they said that they thought that he was a great fit because of position flexibility, the ability to be a quality number 3 cornerback and playing behind a guy and has a relationship with Kalen Bullock. So a third USC defender. And again, Kamari Ramsey was a guy that started off his career at UCLA and then worked his way on over to USC. The thing that I'm going to be really interested in, I kind of laughed this off, but if you had taken Marlon Klein where you took Kamari Ramsey, maybe do you feel better about that selection? I'm not sure. And like if you took Ramsey like in the 3rd round versus taking him like at pick 59, or even if you took him at 59, is anybody really complaining? Like maybe because of, again, you took a safety with your second round pick. It's a little kind of alarming that maybe that's a sign of you're moving off of Kalen Bullock in the future after spending money on Reed Blankenship. But like, I thought Ramsey was a steal in the 5th round for the way that he plays football. Did deal with injury, so that's a big reason why he was available in the 5th round. But really fun player. He is going to work all across that secondary. I think him and Jalen Reed are going to fight for that big dime package look when they run 6 defensive backs out there. Okay. And Jalen Smith's going to work his way on in too. But it's really just going to be on what do we need for this certain play. Do we need a nickel defender? Do we need another safety that can play kind of like that rover role? Do we need a third cornerback out there? They're all going to be things that we're looking at for sure.
And then on special teams, I just want to bring this up because they traded for one punter and then they signed another one after the draft. Is that that's a training camp battle?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, okay. Like, I love when people look at like trades like, oh, well, they gave a draft compensation for this dude. So it's like, it's going to
be,
they gave him like, do you know what the pick was for Kai Kroger? Don't quote me on this.
I don't know. Was it?
No, don't quote me on this. I'm pretty sure it's a 2029 7th round. I mean, we're talking 3 years down the line. Yeah. It's like what's pick, or is it 2028 pick? And they got to pick back in return with that. So this is a guy who, if he makes the team, he makes the team. If he does, he doesn't.
Sure.
Jack Stonehouse was an all ACC punter for Syracuse last season. They let Tommy Townsend walk. Both of these guys have faults to their game. I'm not going to act like that I know everything about punting. But I will say both have had 2 or 3 punts that were great hang time and very impressive. So I think in that standpoint, you got to feel good that you at least are going to have a punter that isn't there. But yeah, it's a battle right now. It is.
Okay. So what didn't the team do in the offseason that you think could come back to hurt them? And it could be nothing. Do you think they did everything that they could have done this offseason?
I mean, the only thing I would say is that if you knew, I think if you knew that EJ Speed was going to be out with the injury,
okay,
you take a linebacker a lot earlier, and maybe you take Marlon Klein later. Like I think that's it. But again, like you're nitpicking here. Like sure. EJ Speed's a 3rd linebacker, and Marlon Klein's a 3rd tight end. Okay. They did everything that they could to address the offensive line within reason. I do think that Nick Caserio could have been a little bit more aggressive in adding an offensive lineman. Like the way I would put it is, if he didn't pay for Ed Ingram and he didn't pay for Wyatt Teller, and he still drafted Keelan Rutledge, maybe he could have gotten Connor McDermott from Buffalo, or he could have gone after like a bigger name out there. I think that's like the only thing that you're saying at this point.
Okay,
you got guys who fit the mold extremely well for this defense. I mean, for this offensive line and what you want your identity to be. The question that you have is it enough? I guess would be the way I would put it. So CJ Stroud really is going to come down to it. Do you feel like that? Yes, CJ is going to take that next jump forward. Did you add enough at the running back position to where you take it off of him? On paper, this should still be a 12-win team. They should still be the favorites in the AFC South. They still should be considered one of the top 3 teams in the AFC. But it really is going to come down to what CJ Stroud does in 2026. If he looks really good, he's going to be locked in and feel really good about where you are. And if he's not, he's not.
Yeah, these win totals here appear to be a little low for me. So I'm not crazy when I'm saying, well, over 10.5 and you're giving me plus 136 and I'm supposed to be concerned with them winning 11 games. I mean, that's a little bit surprising that anyone would think, unless there's an injury and you can't predict injuries, that this team can't win 11 games.
I mean, they won 12 last year and they won 3 with Davis Mills at quarterback. And in my opinion, and again, it's rude, but at the same time, I'm honest and I don't really care. The offensive line wasn't good last season. People just look at it and said, no, people just said, oh, well, the offensive line was better. Okay. Well, just because the crap has a bunch of gold flakes in it doesn't mean that it's now made of solid gold.
It was really bad the year before, so
it was just you were at such a rock bottom in 2024 that crap looks good right now. Like it still is crap. Sure. And so they got rid of what were issues for that offensive line from a season ago. And if everything goes according to plan, they're going to have 4 new starters this season. And the only guy they have back is Ariante Ursary, who for a rookie looked really good at times, but looked like a rookie. And it's way too soon to tell if he's going to end up hitting or swinging and missing.
Sure.
But you're going to have 4 new dudes up in the offense. I mean, 3 new dudes on the starting offensive line, maybe a 4th, but more than likely not because Eddie comes back.
And the last thing before I let you go, injuries. Is there anybody else? We've already talked about a good number of them. Braden Smith, what's his status?
The plan is he'll be good to go for the starters training camp.
Okay.
But, this is a guy that's dealt with injuries throughout his entire career. So if he is slow coming out of the gate, it's something to worry about. It's when you get closer to the season what's going to be his role.
MJ Stewart?
He's expected back no later than the first week of the regular season.
Okay. And how's Keontae Hamilton looking now?
He has barely been out there. So
he's not out there yet. Okay.
We're still waiting to see what his role is going to be.
And everybody else, nobody else that we haven't discussed, everyone else should be fine.
Tank Dell is still, they say he is going to be good to go for training camp. What does good to go mean?
Yeah.
80%, 100%, no limitations. It's not something you got to wonder about. Marlon Klein's been dealing with a hamstring injury that kept him out for the end of minicamp. They expect him to be fine for the start of for the start of training camp. Okay. So he's got 6 weeks to recover. That's really about it. Wyatt Teller will take a day or two like a veteran does because again, he has been in the league forever, but I mean, nothing to be concerned about. The 3 big ones that you could look for is Braden Smith, but I don't think you have to worry about it. Tank Dell, because of, again, he's 19 months removed from the injury, and we're still barely seeing him get back out there. And EJ Speed, who has already basically been rolled out for most, if not the entire season, after a torn pec.
Cole, I really appreciate it. Great job, as always, letting us know what's going on with the Houston Texans, and I look forward to this. Makes it a lot easier, so when we talk, hopefully before the season begins, it gets your final evaluation on the team. We've kind of cut off some of the meat on the bone there. We'll make things a lot easier. So can't wait till August. That means we're only like a few weeks away before the start of the season. So I appreciate it.
Anytime, Greg. Thanks for having me, bud.
Thanks, Cole. All right. That's Cole Thompson. You can check out his work for the Houston Texans right here in the description area of this video, both for his website, the Texans Wire, also his X account. So anything at all pertaining to the Houston Texans, you can check out the links in the description area of this video and check out Cole's work. So, yeah, I mean, it's look, the Super Bowl is one thing at 18-1, but when you're and even the division number, which is plus 110, so that is basically even money that Houston will win the division, and that's fine. That's fair. This has been the main team that has represented this division for several years now. They deserve to be looked at as the team to beat. It's the win totals. It's the win totals, once again, that just look a little low. As we just said, I mean, I don't even need to go minus 125. I mean, why would I go with 125? Minus 125, excuse me, on the 9.5 for 10 wins when I can get plus 136 for 11. I mean, now we're not talking plus 160 or plus 180, but I'm just like, I mean, come on. If you win 10 games, that's a major disappointment if you're the Houston Texans. Now, maybe they're looking at it as the division will be tougher. Daniel Jones, if he stays on the whole season, Tennessee will be better. That's what they're going to be. I don't know what else to think about. But when I go over win totals and such, the first thing that I'm thinking about is how good is the team? What do I think about the team? And when I have a team that's sitting here that has consistently proved that they're a playoff team, number one, okay? So immediately, most playoff teams, like 95% of them are winning teams. So that's 9 wins, okay? So now I only have to get a win or two to go over these win totals here. And again, as I said, they're better on paper. They are better on paper than they were last year. Just look at this roster. And yes, as Colin said, there are still questions along this line because there isn't one guy that's just wow, that guy is the rock. No, there isn't that guy. They're hoping that Ursary can become that guy. And look, when we talked last year about Ursary, we had this conversation. Love the guy coming out of college as I wouldn't call him like a major sleeper because he was a second-round pick, but as a tackle that I felt could have easily been a first-round draft pick. I really felt that. So to get him in the second round, that was a really good pick. Thought we had this conversation, Colin and I, right after that draft, before the season began. Ursary's good pick. First good pick I really felt that Caserio made along the offensive line. That has been his issue as a GM. That's the reason that I was concerned about the Rutledge pick, and especially the pick in round 4, because he doesn't have a good track record for picking offensive linemen. So why would I feel that these two guys will be okay? Especially since, again, I thought that maybe even the Rutledge pick was a little bit high. But as I mentioned before, it's okay. It's not a major deal. It is what it is. If they love the guy, then okay. And if he comes out and he plays well, then hey, nice pick. And there are some nice things about the kid. We went over that. But you take a look at the new guys, and Wyatt Teller did not look like the same player when Bill Callahan was there. He was, for a season or two, the best guard in football, the best running guard in football. But Bill Callahan left. And then all of a sudden, Wyatt Teller kind of looks like a pedestrian guy. So was that injuries? Was that coaching? A lot can happen when you go from a bad organization like Cleveland to a winning organization. And Braden Smith, Trent Brown at right tackle, well, that's okay. You can get by with that. That's not going to prevent you from winning a Super Bowl. So really, it's going to be about, this pick really becomes major, not just because they need Rutledge to give them something this year. They need them, whether he starts or not. And look, if you draft a guy in the first round, especially in a position that you need upgraded, the kid has to start. Whether he starts week 1 or week 3, he has to start. And we talked about it. Yes, they want him to start. Of course, they want him to start. Yes, but he better start. If he's not starting this year, or if he is and he's just not ready, and you got to wait till next year for him to be ready, well, I don't know about that pick now. This team is ready to win a Super Bowl now. You don't spend first-round draft picks, move up to get first-round draft picks. Well, you know what? Maybe he'll be okay by next year. You don't want Jake Andrews as your center when you're trying to win a Super Bowl. Not when the rest of the offensive line is not really put together like one of the top units in the league. Again, if everything works out with this offensive line, even with Rutledge, this is a average offensive line. And you know what? That's all it's going to take, because it's been so bad, even though, as we just said, it got a little bit better last year, from terrible to bad. Now the hope is, can we have ourselves an average offensive line? It's going to take a lot. And we'll see if they can get that done. Okay. And the other thing too is I sit here and I criticize Caserio about not being able to draft offensive linemen. Well, sometimes, and that's the easy thing for me to do, but how do we know it's not the coaching? I'm not going to sit here and go over it and say, okay, well, the coach is awesome. It's always the GM or the coach is not as good as, everybody's saying. And, well, they fired the coach, they brought someone else in, and now that's rectified. Just always keep that in mind. Sometimes it is easy to just blame the GM, but make sure what's the coach like? Is the coach getting the most out of these players? Ingram did have a big year last year. So, hey, they must be doing something right. Ursary, Ingram, same year. Don't think it's the coaching. And I really do believe, as I said when we were talking about, if something happens to Montgomery, and he's such a physical running back, he's getting a little older. He's not old. He's not Nick Chubb, but he's getting older there. He's definitely aging. And physical running backs age a lot quicker. Now, good for Montgomery the last couple of years in Detroit. He didn't have to be the workhorse. So that saved his body a little bit. And he should have a good couple of years in Houston where he should be still the best that he can give the NFL. He should still have that in him. But if anything happens to Montgomery, and I'm not talking long-term, I'm talking short-term, anything happens to him for 6 weeks, 8, half a season, who are you going to turn to? And that's why when we were having that discussion, I just feel that it's something I would look out for at training camp. Is Whittington capable of being that guy? Or is he just going to be depth at running back? Because I really believe whoever is the number 3 running back on this team, based on what I'm hearing, that they want to turn more to a run-oriented offense, which I think is a great idea. Where you have C.J. Stroud, who has not proven himself at the big time in the big moments in the postseason, and you've got the best defense in the NFL, and you want to run the ball more and be more physical, great idea. But if you do that, I think you have to have a better plan than Jawar Jordan and Noah Whittington as your number 3 running back. Because all of a sudden, then it becomes a much more important spot on the team. You cannot afford to have those guys because, again, as I said, and Cole kind of confirmed it, Woody Marks was not drafted here to be a number 1 running back. Woody Marks excels or should excel in the NFL and has excelled in the past, in college especially. He's the 3rd down guy. As Cole said, give me 10, 12 touches a game. I'll be at my best, especially on passing downs. So if something happens to Montgomery, you don't want to be going, all right, Woody, we're going to put you back into that starting role. Well, then what happens to the 3rd down role? Well, we don't really have that on the team now. He was the 3rd down guy. So then what? Woody's going to now be the workhorse? Well, no, he can't be the workhorse. That didn't work. That's not his style. So unless you're going to go out and get a backup for Marks, you're going to get a backup 3rd down guy, somebody that excels in that department, like a Nicholas Singleton. If they would have drafted Nicholas Singleton, then I would have been like, okay, they must feel Marks could then slip into the role at number 1. And then Singleton would move into his role. But they didn't do that. So that's why, are you sure? No, look, I have no problem with Whittington being that guy. I don't care that it wasn't drafted. If they believe Whittington can be that guy, if anything happened to Montgomery, okay, you're set. Jordan is not going to be that guy. So if they believe in Whittington, fine. And you know what? If they don't make any moves before the season begins, then that means that they feel, and Whittington makes the team and he's in number 3, then I guess they've made their mind up. So we'll see. But I just think it's something to keep an eye on. Okay. So again, you look at this offense and the offensive line on paper, better. Running game, lights, years, better. Okay. You went from Nick Chubb as your starter, and then Woody Marks came in to be the starter because Nick Chubb couldn't do the job, to David Montgomery as your starter. Now look, Montgomery is not, I don't know, let's just even take my boy, Breece Hall. He's not a top 5 running back in the NFL, but he's the next thing. He's just that next guy. You know, you're going to have a couple of guys that are elite. Then you're going to have that next group, which are very good running backs, the Breece Hall types. Then you're going to have that next group, which are really good players. You know, they're good starters. They're going to do really well for you. They're going to produce for you, but they're not special. That's David Montgomery. David Montgomery is a really good player, really good running back. And because Houston has not had a running game for a few years and hasn't had a running back that they can count on for multiple years in a while, this is going to, just like we were saying with the offensive line, well, it was so bad, it had to get better. But the running game wasn't that bad. It just was missing a true identity, a true starter. And now they've got one. And now Woody does not have to be the starter. So instead of him being a starter, and that doesn't give you the best of Woody necessarily, now you'll get the best of Woody as the change of pace guy, the third down guy. So the running game now all of a sudden is much better. Throw in the fact that they've got the identity they're looking for, meaner, tougher, physical guys up front, more talent on the offensive line. They've got a deeper rotation at tight end. And then all of a sudden you look at the passing game and you're like, okay, if we truly are only going to let CJ pass the ball 25 times or less a game, and when he does pass, he's going to throw to one of the top receivers in the game. Nico Collins is a legit number one receiver in this league. He is a legit all-pro caliber player. You put Nico Collins on the Buffalo Bills, and he's first-team all-pro. So that's how good Nico Collins is. And then you throw in the talent that they were able to assemble from the last few drafts, including Jaden Higgins. And I'm not even going to bring in Tank Dell. To me, Tank Dell's gravy. Because even if Tank Dell plays this year, and the second first of all, he's going to play, how many times do we hear players who are dealing with these types of injuries, it takes him a full year to be the guy that he was before the injury? Well, this guy hasn't played for over 19 months? Every month becomes another month. And then he's going to get on the field at some point. And you think you're getting the old Dell right away? That would be surprising. And then how do we even know he's going to survive the year? This is what happens to players like Tank Dell. Why do you think a player like Tank Dell, there was some question about whether or not he should have been a third-round draft pick in reality because of his size. But the reason that he was drafted in the third round and the reason that he produced when he did play kind of goes hand in hand with his nickname, Tank, because he's a tough son of a bitch, and he really had to be and has to be in order to play in this league. But the body's the body, and it's just going to let you down. And so, especially, again, when you're playing big boy ball with this body, no matter what kind of a tank you're going to be, it is what it is. So you can't count on Tank. But if Tank plays and Tank gives you something, it's gravy. That's all it is. It's gravy. Because you know what? They have enough talent at receiver based on the fact that they want to run the football more. So this is not going to be, hey, we're throwing the ball 30 times a game minimum, and I've got to have 3 or 4 different targets, and I got to have a weapon at tight end and whatever. No, this is not that type of offense. So you already have a stud number one in Nico Collins. You've got a few other guys at receiver, at tight end. Woody Marks, also very good receivers we just talked about. You're fine in the passing game based on, again, the philosophy that we're being told that they're going to run in 2026. And then on defense, you're talking about the best defense in the NFL. And the reason it's the best defense in the NFL is because you have a legitimate thumper in the middle. You have 2 top-of-the-line edge rushers, including 1 elite edge rusher. And on top of that, you then throw in the draft, Caden McDonald, which you didn't have last year. Now you have an upgrade in the middle of the defense. And then you double that or triple that with the secondary, where you have not 1 in Derek Stingley, but 2 number 1 corners. And Jalen Petrie, very underrated at that spot. It could play a variety of roles for that defense. Now, I would, on defense, the only concern I would probably have, not a big concern, but a concern would be safety. That's all. And only because Reed did not have a big year last year. But I just think it's one of those things. Maybe it's a nitpick. Same thing with Bullock. So it's still, but you know what? When you have so much talent on defense, these guys are more than serviceable. Everybody else will make them look fine. Sort of like the offensive line. If you've got like 3 or 4 really good linemen and 1 guy that's the line will be fine. Everyone else will make the guy look okay. Okay. Anyway, So there you go. The Houston Texans. I think they are getting a good number at Super Bowl at 18-1. I think they're getting a fair South number at plus 110. I would not touch the plus 110 though, because and let's just get out of this. So I don't want to come back to the win total here. Again, this is an easy one. And you know what? I would even do this one over 11.5 plus 235. So I wouldn't even touch over 9.5. I would just go 10.5, 11.5. That's what I would do. I would use the 11.5 as the, hey, if we can get that, great. But you know what? If I get the 10.5, I'm still fine. So that's what I would do with Houston as far as win totals. And then we looked at we've already looked at the Super Bowl. So as far as the division line here, see, this is the reason why I wouldn't touch Houston in the division at even, because of this team. And we also don't know about this team because how good they looked when Daniel Jones was healthy last year. You got to remember, before Daniel Jones injured himself, the Colts were running away with the division. I mean, you should have seen the odds before his injury. It's like Houston and Jacksonville were like, I don't know, 4-1, 5-1, 6-1 to win the division at the midway point of the season. The Colts were like clearly, I mean, they were like, who knows, what were they, like minus, I don't know, 300, 200? And then Jones goes down, and you even figured when Jones went down, they had such a big lead, you still figured, you know what, they'll hold on, it's a big lead. But then Jacksonville decided not to lose any football games at the same time that the Colts lost Daniel Jones. And that's the reason why I couldn't touch Houston to win the division. And I don't really look at it as it matters. You know what? Look at what Houston did last year. All right. Houston was able to prove to everybody, look, it doesn't matter who we play, where we play, first round playoffs, we're going to win. And nobody thought that they couldn't beat the Patriots when they went on the road again. And that was the disappointing thing about that outcome, was that we all felt with that defense that as long as they didn't give the game away, that they should have been fine. But again, the problem was not on defense. The problem was the offensive line was still bad. We talked about Nico Collins not being there, talked about Schultz going out in the first quarter. There were already an offense playing with, a questionable quarterback after the week before in C.J. Stroud and a questionable offensive line. And you don't have a true number one running back. Now you take out number one receiver, you take out number one tight end, which is really de facto number two receiver. And you just, and the Patriots could actually play some football. And you're on the road, and their defense just swarmed the hell out of C.J. Stroud on every play. But unfortunately, what C.J. Stroud did wrong is, instead of understanding that, look, I don't have the weapons here. I'm not going to get us out of this. I'm not going to win this game here by me throwing for 300 yards. So I just can't do anything stupid. And that was the problem, was that him not being aware of the situation. Okay. Those turnovers that he made could have been, let's just, I don't want to go back and rehash things, but you just have to be more aware of the situation, and you can't put yourself in a position to turn the ball over the way that he did. And this is partly experience. I don't want to get him off the hook, because even though he's still relatively young, he's played enough ball now. He's been in enough big games. His best game as a college player was the last game he ever played, monster game against the Georgia Bulldogs in a huge, huge playoff game, in a game they probably should have won. All they needed to do was have the field goal kicker make the 45-yard field goal, and they beat Georgia. Couldn't do it. End of C.J. Stroud's career at Ohio State. Comes to the pros, has a monster rookie season. Again, playoff after playoff after playoff. All those wins, whether he's had big games or not, all experience. I'm not going to let him off the hook with that. I'm just not. He's got to know better. And he really, really let the team down. You know, again, I don't know if he was trying to do too much. I don't know if it was one of those things where, you know, it's on the road. And this is the other thing. The Pittsburgh win was important because it said, hey, we can go on the road in the playoffs and win, something we couldn't do in the previous few years. The problem, though, was he didn't have a good game at Pittsburgh. So that might have been the first sign that, well, we kind of got out of this one, but it wasn't because the offense, it wasn't because CJ Stroud grew up on the road in the playoffs. So really, if you look at CJ Stroud's career on the road in the playoffs, not very good. And just that whole experience last year, you know, that's why I really believe. And again, I think it's as we said in the very beginning of the interview, there's only one way I believe that CJ Stroud deserves a contract extension if they lose in the playoffs. That is, if the team, well, you know what? It doesn't even matter how good the team is. It's just that if he plays well in the postseason and has a good year and he has a good postseason game, but they lose because the other team just beat them. And it happens all the time in the playoffs in the NFL. Not every time when you're in a playoff game in the NFL, the team who beat the winning team beats the losing team. And it's, oh yeah, they're the better team. Of course they won. Every team that wins a playoff game is better than a team that loses a playoff game. Of course that's not the case. There's a lot of circumstances where not only is the team that loses the playoff game deserving a better fate and probably should have won the game, but there's a lot of circumstances when it's like, look, both teams deserved it. One team had to win. We've seen it over and over again. We probably see it at least one time in every playoff. I mean, look at the LA Carolina game last year in the playoffs. You can't tell me Carolina didn't deserve to win that game. I'm not saying the Rams didn't deserve it, but hey, it just was what Carolina did everything they could. There's nothing Carolina did in that game where you went, oh, they weren't ready for the limelight there. No, it was just, they just came up against, maybe it was just that little thing that the Rams were able to get over the Carolina Panthers last year. Experience. It's a little thing. But with CJ Stroud, he had the experience over Drake May. That's the other thing that really was confounding to Houston Texans fans, I got to believe. Here's a kid that's only in his second year. They won 4 games last year. They have this incredible season with the easiest schedule in the NFL. And here we are with a great opportunity to beat this team with our great defense. But you know what Drake May didn't do? He did not lose the game. Now, did he encounter the type of plays that were going on that CJ dealt with? Yeah, it's picky, but that was a hell of a defensive team. And I'm not going to let CJ off the hook there, like I said. If CJ Stroud just does not do anything stupid, that game could be 10-7 in the fourth quarter. And now it's up to just, now all of a sudden the pressure is on everybody on that football field. Every single play matters. And now who knows how Drake May plays? How do you know Drake May comes out of that game okay? He sure didn't come out of the game in the Super Bowl okay. You can't talk about the championship game because it was in the snow for a half, and he didn't do anything in the entire game. So Drake May did nothing in the championship game. He got pretty much lit up for the most part in the Super Bowl, which meant that Houston really didn't do anything wrong defensively against him in that football game. It's just that the Houston offense made it a lot easier for him. Now, I don't need to keep going on and on about CJ Stroud, but I just felt, you know what? We're going to talk about the Houston Texans with this type of interview situation twice. Once now and once again when we talk to Cole again, hopefully around August, and get his final prediction on the season, update everything regarding the training camp, questions that I asked them, and other things like injuries and such. And then we'll go from there. But Let's just get that out in the open and move on. And now again, I think that, as like I was saying at the very beginning of that, just play your best. Don't give the game away. And if you wind up losing to a team that just beats you at the buzzer, then hey, that's okay. I think if as a Texans fan, you can live with that. You can say, just wasn't our year, but at least we didn't give the game away. At least what we thought was our franchise quarterback didn't implode and look like a complete stranger to us. Hey, you know what? Maybe he is going to be okay. Maybe the excuses that we were giving him last year, maybe they were warranted. No Nico Collins, no Schultz, the offensive line and all that. Maybe that was warranted. Maybe we were too hard on him. But he's got to go out there and prove it. Because I tell you what, if he doesn't do that, if he loses again in the playoffs and it's just much his fault, or maybe more his fault than any other player on that team, it is time to move on. You just can't keep sort of like, it's easy when you replace a field goal kicker. It's like, of course the Green Bay Packers were going to get rid of Brandon McManus. I mean, come on, who are we kidding? Anytime you get a kicker who's not like a kicker would have to be drafted by a team or with the team for 5 or 6 years to be able to have like one bad playoff miss. Okay, he's like the rest of us. He's going to have a bad playoff game. It happens. He'll be back. He's with us the rest of the way. But those free agent type kickers that are new to the area and they come to a team and here we are in the playoffs and he lets us down. He's like one of the main reasons that we lost this game. He ain't coming back. There's no reason. He doesn't have any loyalty. He doesn't have any roots here. He's not coming back. Now for CJ, yeah, the roots are there. There's no question about that. Again, they want him to be a franchise quarterback, but you cannot let the rest of the team down. You just can't. You can't keep saying, all right, yeah, well, CJ, he's I know he hasn't really won us any major games. Yes, he's won some playoff games, but those are home wildcard games. He hasn't won the game, that second game on the road. And if he can't do that for us, we have to move on. We're not going to give him that big contract because that is going to stick you bad. This is the NFL. You give contracts away to these players, man, and you could be in trouble for a few years with the salary cap. You just can't make those mistakes. Now, I do not believe Davis Mills is the answer. I'm not going to sit here, though, and tell you that Davis Mills couldn't quarterback that defense with this offense to a Super Bowl because I don't know. I've seen quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks like Trent Dilfer win Super Bowls. Why? For the exact reason. Because he had the best defense in football and he just didn't do anything stupid. They ran the ball, they played great defense, and he just managed the game. Could Davis Mills do that for the Houston Texans? Maybe. Do I want Davis Mills as my franchise quarterback? Probably not. I wouldn't go that far. Do they have someone else on the roster? I know we didn't talk about him. Maybe we will in August. I mentioned this to Cole when we talked last year, that I really liked the acquisition of Graham Mertz. Let's put him up here. And so, yeah, I really liked Mertz. Now, he came out of Wisconsin in high school as a really top recruit. And there was a lot expected of Mertz. And it didn't work. Every year I hear the same thing with Mertz at Wisconsin. Oh, watch out. This is our year. We got the running game. We got the defense. Now we finally have a quarterback. Wisconsin's just not really known for having, they have like the Brooks Bollinger types, if you remember who he is. But those guys that are, again, just game managers. That's all Wisconsin ever had. So, we got a passer now. We got someone that could actually, this is going to be great. This is our season. Never happened. So after 3 years at Wisconsin, he finally left, goes to Florida. And what happens that first year he goes to Florida? He has his career year. Next year he comes back, final season, and has another decent year, but gets injured. And it's just not really the way he wanted to end his career. But overall, you saw in that that first season in Florida and some of the games in his final season, you saw something there that said, you know what, this kid makes plays. This kid makes plays. He's made plays. Now, again, the Big Ten, most of his, no, I don't even want to see that film. But in that year, in those year and a half, in the SEC, mind you, okay, he was able to make plays. He made plays on the run. He was very accurate. He never turned the ball over. And to me, it was like I was looking at a extremely poor man's Josh Allen. And just the way that he looked to me, he just had that kind of part of his game that I was really intrigued with. And so you're talking about somebody, again, I just showed you, you didn't see any scouting report on Mertz. Mertz was a player that Ourlads felt wasn't even considered a draft pick. He was going to be considered a UDFA, and UDFAs don't get scouting reports on Ourlads. But he comes into the league last year as a draft pick, still banged up, makes the team. He's here again. Now, what do I expect from Graham Mertz? I don't know, of course. I don't even know if he'll make the team out of this camp. I have no idea. You know, I mean, again, I'll talk to Cole. I'll definitely, because he's now within a year in the system. As far as I know, he's healthy now. I want to see what Graham Mertz can do as a young quarterback with the team. I am not going to throw Graham Mertz aside as this undrafted quarterback that is just going to be a journeyman in the NFL. Will that be the case? Probably. The odds say it will be that. That's what old Graham Mertz will do. The best he will be is a journeyman backup, and maybe he'll find a role in that in the NFL. Maybe that will be something he could do. And who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, he'll get a shot at being a starter somewhere. And then maybe he'll just find his niche. I don't know. Or maybe nothing. We'll see nothing of Graham Mertz. In a year or two, you will go, Graham who? Nobody knows these things, okay? But there are enough players in the league that I look at from my own scouting eyes, not as an expert. I'll leave that up to the guys at Ourlads. I'm more in the programming department. You know, I'm in the producers department, not in the scouting department of Ourlads. But I've seen enough of football to know when there are certain guys that, and especially the sleeper types, and I'm really looking forward to doing. We're going to definitely put out some cool videos when we get closer to the season. Probably wait until July, maybe even sprinkled into August, where we're going to put together maybe some breakthrough players to keep an eye on, sleepers that are maybe even the top UDFAs from this year's class. All sorts of really cool videos where I'm going to put out, okay, here are some guys to keep an eye on. Guys that you may not know of, guys that, but again, I think in order for me to really put that out there, I'm going to have to see some more training camp this year and maybe even a preseason game or two. And then we'll put out some really cool videos to keep you guys up to speed on these types of players. And maybe Graham Mertz will be one of those players. If I see, because all I need to see out of Graham Mertz in here is that he's having a good camp. And I watch him in preseason and he's playing well. If I see any of that, already having a good feel for the guy from college, then I'm going to speak highly of him. Not that he's going to replace CJ Stroud in 2026, but somebody that Houston might be able to turn to in 2027 or 2028. Now, again, it's not going to go to Mertz, even if Mertz is more than capable, because Mills will get the first crack at it. But what the Houston Texans need to do if CJ Stroud does not work out, that's why we started this conversation off talking about this deep quarterback class coming out. This is another thing that we're going to do. We're going to track all of these quarterbacks all season long. I'm going to put together like a template of all of the top quarterbacks that are talked about as potential first or second round draft picks, especially the first round guys, and follow their season, on a week to week basis. How are they looking? Maybe even have them ranked and change their ranking from week to week, depending on how they play. Because there's a good amount of talent at quarterback. And we're not just talking about the Arch Mannings either. Okay. We're talking about that second level. Some of these kids are, I don't know. I really don't know what people really feel about, say, a Trinidad Chambliss. But if Trinidad Chambliss continues to show me what he showed us on the national stage this past year, then the only thing holding him back is his size. And that's why when I talked about this I think it was last week, we talked about, I think it might have been with our Florida guy, where we talked about what is Trinidad Champ? What's his size? What's his real size? And that's what I really want to know. And I'll continue to ask that question. And I'm hoping we'll have our Ole Miss guy on. And what is he? Tell me what is he? Is he 5'10"? Is he 5'11"? Because he can't make it in the NFL if he's shorter than a certain number. We're seeing how hard it is even for Bryce Young. And I'm high on Bryce Young this season. But it's very rare for a quarterback that small to make it. He has to be special. And I believe Bryce can make that move. But getting back to Chambliss, the point is that he's not talked about like Arch Manning is, like Brendan Sorsby would have been, like Dante Moore, Julian Sayin, go down the line. So that's the thing. I really like Mensa. I like Chambliss. So if a good number of these kids play well, even a team like Houston will have an opportunity to take, I wouldn't say a flyer, but hey, you know what? CJ's not our guy. It didn't work out. He lost in the postseason again. He turned the ball over 4 times. We're not giving him a long-term deal. We need to find someone else, bring him in here through the draft. And because of the amount of quarterbacks that could be available in this year's draft, and I'm talking about quantity, then Houston will have a chance. And so we're going to chronicle that all year, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to it because, again, I say this at least once or twice a week, but trust me, when we get close to the regular season, things are going to be even funner here with our coverage. Because right now, I enjoy doing these interviews where we get to just chip away, brain pick these really good analysts who cover these teams 24/7, 365. That gives us all sorts of information that we didn't have unless we were like most people who try to find out this information. What do? They check out the link in the description of the video and they follow Cole on Twitter, on X. They read Cole's articles. They listen even to Cole's podcasts from time to time. But what you don't get is, if you don't want to listen to what we do here, is you don't get us grilling guys like Cole and giving us information on a lot of things going on with the team at one time. Because Cole's probably, like, if he does his podcast, Cole and everybody like, other guys like Cole, these are things that Cole's more than likely already talked about over the last several months. And yet I'm getting Cole to talk about all of it in one 35, 45-minute conversation. And that also makes it a lot easier to absorb the information. And then you've got 45 minutes of really good information. Thank you, Cole. Appreciate it. Texans, got it. Move on. Oh, great. New York Giants, Ryan Dunleavy educated us right there for 35, 45 minutes. Everything I needed to know about the Giants. Boom. Thanks, Ryan. Boom. Moving on. All 32 NFL teams, 50, 60 teams in college football. The more you do that stuff, the more you absorb all of that information. I'm telling you, it's very valuable. And I hope you'll subscribe here to the channel because it's the best way to help you guys out for whatever you need the information for. You need it for gambling. You need it for fantasy. or you're just a fanatic in football and you just want to be educated and you get into these conversations with your friends and you just want to get the leg up on them, you know a little bit more than they do about other things going on in the NFL, not just the teams that we both root for. So that's what we pride ourselves here at the Ourlads Football Network. And we certainly appreciate everybody who is on board and subscribes to the channel. So, and let us know in the comments section what you think about the work that we do and anything else that you think that we can do to help brighten up your day whenever we're talking about the NFL and college football. So, okay, let's just wrap it up. So again, I can't go with Houston and the division because I think Jacksonville has a really good chance to win this division. So I think it'll be between Houston and Jacksonville. And therefore, I'm not going to take either team, to tell you the truth, to win the division. But the win totals, I like both Houston and Jacksonville for the win totals. We've already talked about Jacksonville. I think we did that last week. So you can check that one out. Let me see. So again, the win. Let me just pop on the win totals for Jacksonville so you can see what we did here. Here we go. So, yeah. So here, I thought this was a very disrespectful. Look at this. They're giving us plus 140 for a 10-win Jacksonville team. Plus 140. It's just like the Houston. It's almost very similar to Houston, except Houston's getting a 1-game edge on Jacksonville. So Jacksonville's 8.5, 9.5, 10.5. Houston is 9.5, 10.5, 11.5. And both of them, I think, are disrespectful. I mean, especially Jacksonville, because I think Jacksonville and Houston are just right there. See, the reason why, in my opinion, they're right there is the quarterback position. I'm not the biggest Trevor Lawrence fan. I've never bought in that Trevor Lawrence is going to be that perennial star quarterback. And even now, I don't see it. And you can kind of see why. He had his shot and didn't have his best game against the Bills when he needed to have his best game. Does he still have a chance to grow? Of course he does, and maybe he will. But I still prefer Trevor Lawrence over CJ Stroud. And I think that is a big enough deal because Houston's defense is definitely better than Jacksonville's. But Jacksonville's got the quarterback, and the quarterback is very important, as we know. And that other quarterback better not screw you up when he's got everything going for him on defense. Now, do I believe Houston is better than Jacksonville? Like, if all things are equal, who would I go with? It's Jacksonville, Houston, neutral field. Everybody's healthy. Who do I like? And to be honest with you, at this point in time, I couldn't tell you because I need to see CJ Stroud play this year. But if I don't have that, I might actually lean towards Jacksonville, even though I clearly think Houston's the better team. Their defense is just so good that now that they have a running game to go along with them, I don't think CJ Stroud is that bad. I just think there's something going on with that kid in his head that he's got to get rectified. He's got the entire season to do it. And if everything goes well during the season and he's been a fine regular season quarterback, then all that needs to happen is when he gets to the postseason is just not screw it up. But anyway, I think Jacksonville, because I think these teams are so close, I just think they're getting that much more disrespected. And we'll talk about Jacksonville and Houston and Indianapolis and Tennessee on Friday's show. That's when we do our division previews with our resident handicappers, our professional handicappers at ProLine TV, Andy Isko and the legend Jim Feist, both located in Las Vegas. We've already done 3 divisions so far. We're doing the AFC South on Friday at 4:00 Eastern, and we'll be going over these teams. So, yeah, I think you're getting look at this. I can get 425 on Jacksonville where it's what, 2-something on Houston. And I would take both of them. See, I would take all three of these with Jacksonville. So I really like both Jacksonville and Houston. And I think both teams, I think the only way that both teams might struggle more than I'm thinking, it would have to be that Indianapolis is going to find, like, that Indianapolis team that we saw in the beginning of the season winds up being there the whole season with a healthy Daniel Jones. Now, if that happens, then it might be that much more tougher, even though I'm still buying in with the win totals for both Houston and Jacksonville, because we just talked about the NFC West last week, and we talked about how all three of those teams just did it last year. They were all able to win, I think, what was it, more than 10, 11 games last year, all three of those teams, and we all bought on their over. They did it last year. They could do it this year. And I would say the same thing, including the Colts, as long as the Colts had a healthy Daniel Jones all season. But because we can never count on that, it's not something that just happened once. We've seen this happen before with Daniel Jones. That's even more why I'm confident that Houston and Jacksonville will be able to benefit from some of that uncertainty in Indianapolis. And as much as Tennessee is going to be better, because they are, and we did talk to Tennessee as well. We had our Tennessee conversation 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, or last week. These weeks just go by. So down to 1, Indianapolis. So I'm trying to get my Indianapolis guy to come on. And when we do that, we'll have all 4 AFC South teams talked about way before we get into training camp. So, yeah, that is going to wrap it up. So, again, I'm going to go take the win totals. And I would probably also go with the Super Bowl line. I think 18-1 is like right on that number where it's like, is it too early? Am I getting good enough value? What's the deal there? Do I need to rush this because it's such a tough division? Is there anything for me to believe that Houston is going to all of a sudden be 12-1 in a couple of weeks when the season begins? Well, let's take a look at the schedule, and you might want to wait, because take a look at these games that Houston's going to be dealing with to come out of the gate. They're going to be taking on Buffalo, Cincinnati, potentially Daniel Jones and the Colts on the road, and a Dallas Cowboy team that is definitely going to be better. So this first 4 games of the season, and it's early in the season, so anything happens. You're not at your best. The good news is 3 out of the 4 at home. All right. And maybe the fourth, the one on the road might be the easiest one. With, again, Dallas. I think most people might look at Dallas as a better option than the Colts this year. So this is a tough way to start the season. So, it might be one of those things where you wait. Now, how it could work against you is if they beat Buffalo and Cincinnati at home, and keep in mind, Houston has had Buffalo's number at home, and Cincinnati gets off to slow starts. So if they're able to go 2-0 against that competition, well, forget about your 18-1. Now we're talking, like I said, maybe we're now at 14 or 12-1 2 weeks into the season. So you do have to consider that. And that is definitely worth considering. But I don't think you're going to see much movement between now and by the time we talk about this team again in August. I don't see why. I think 18-1 is good. It's good value. I can't see Houston going down much further than that. I mean, you've already looked at the win total lines, and they're not really very respectable. So I don't think there's a whole lot of respect there. They're getting too much respect. You better watch out. That line's going to go down for the Super Bowl. I don't see that. So I think you have time. So I'd say, you know what, if you're into the win totals right now and you don't want to see the move, then we've given you those options. For the Super Bowl, I would just wait. I don't think there's any rush. You can hold on to your money. Matter of fact, I've only made 2 Super Bowl wagers right now. I've made, I think I've made 2 Super Bowl wagers and conference championship wagers. And I only did that because of the size of the wagers. I did it with Cincinnati, especially because I knew that the odds were going to go down as soon as the Dexter Lawrence deal made an impact, and it did, like in 24 hours. And then the other was Carolina, because of how much I believe in Carolina and their chances of not only repeating as far as a playoff team, but taking that next step. And in the NFC, I think that's the one thing you also have to keep in mind is that the NFC is still behind the AFC when it comes to star quarterback power. So if the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Bills and the Bengals are all playing playoff football, then you're dealing with Burrow and Jackson and Mahomes and Allen. And that is just tough. Okay. NFC doesn't have that. So that's why I think you have a chance to make a run in the NFC. And look at Seattle did it. Seattle was not no Super Bowl pick by anybody all season, but they had a formula. They had elite special teams, excellent defense, and a very smart game plan on offense. And it all worked out for them. And it didn't hurt also to be able to play those big games in Seattle. Very tough place to play when you're a good football team. So it all worked out for them. But hey, you know what? I think that there's a possibility for some underrated teams in the NFC, not just Carolina or, well, we have Cincinnati, the AFC that I did, but we've already talked about it with Chicago. I think the Chicago Bears are really underrated in the NFC. I think they're being disrespected as the third choice in the NFC North. I wouldn't say that I have that feeling about any team. I'm not sure how I feel about the Cowboys, because I just think it's asking an awful lot for me to believe that the Cowboys can go from, I mean, most teams have to take some sort of baby steps. I know the Patriots did something no team does. And that's even getting to the Super Bowl. Teams usually have to take some sort of a baby step, even to get to the Super Bowl, but let alone lose it. But again, they did something that was so historically crazy regarding the easiness of the regular season schedule and the easiness of the path of the playoffs. That just doesn't happen. Teams will just have that landed on their lap every season. So I can't just say that Dallas can get to the playoffs, win playoff games, and be in the Super Bowl. I just think that if I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking the Cowboys, because look, Dak Prescott ain't old. The team ain't old. The Cowboys are built to be a good team in the next 2 or 3 years. They should be getting better and better on defense. And the offense, there's nothing there that tells me that the offense can't continue to be explosive on the Dak Prescott for the next few years. So I think Dallas's time will come. I'm not saying they're a bad investment, even at 25-1. I don't think they're a bad investment at all. But I still feel more comfortable with teams like Chicago or Carolina, where they've been there last year. They've got their leg up. And I also see improvement on them being better. I think they're already ahead. I think those teams are ahead of Dallas right now. Not just because they've been in the playoffs, but I just think overall, I mean, their success from last year. And some of the games that they were able to win. The Cowboys were more infamous for some of the games they lost last year. So the Cowboys have got to go through a season in which they're able to change things positively and win, get that winning feeling before I think they can go all the way. Even though, like I said, I'm not saying it's not a bad idea. And then in the West, you're not getting any value from any of those teams. All the teams are favorites. Now, the one value I guess you could say you could get is San Francisco. Because like Houston, San Francisco is 18-1 to win the Super Bowl. All right. So now the difference and the reason why I would still take Houston over San Francisco at 18-1 is because San Francisco has got to deal with the Rams and Seattle in their own division. Houston, yes, they have to take on Jacksonville and Indianapolis, but they're not Seattle and the Rams. So it's a little bit tougher of a road for San Francisco to win than Houston. And so now look, the other thing got to go back to, though, is that if those quarterbacks go to the playoffs this year in the AFC, it's going to make it very tough for Houston. That's why last year was a golden opportunity for the Texans. It's one of the main reasons why Texans fans just were so angry that they weren't able to take advantage of all of that opportunity. All of those quarterbacks were gone. It was Drake freaking May they were dealing with. The kid's talented, but he's in the league the second year. He's not ready to be a Super Bowl championship team quarterback. That was our chance, and we blew it. So now you got to go back into 2026. You got to do it all over again. And you got to hope that, hey, if we're in the postseason, I certainly hope we're not taking on any of those quarterbacks. So, because they've taken on those quarterbacks before and have failed. Anyway, so I would probably stick with that. I would go with those would be my bargains right now in the NFC. I would look at Carolina and Chicago right now as the top two. I'm definitely willing to say Dallas is 3. Actually 4, because I'm going to put San Francisco in there as 3. I'm going to put Chicago 1, Carolina 2, San Francisco 3, and Dallas 4. This is just value. That's all that is. And in the AFC, Cincinnati is definitely at the top. They're number 1. That's not even close. And then as far as more value in the AFC, I would put Jacksonville probably at 2. And I might actually you know what? I'll put Denver at 2 because I think Denver's being disrespected. The number is not as big. It's a 20-1, I believe it is. But I've got Denver in there. So your value plays in the AFC are you got Cincinnati, you have Houston, Jacksonville, and Denver. Those are your 4 value plays in the AFC. And I gave you the 4 in the NFC. I don't think that's going to change. I don't think my mind's going to change at all. Maybe the order will, but if you want to take advantage of that value on those teams, then I think you should, because some of those odds are definitely going to change. You know, I think teams like Jacksonville even, so the bigger numbers, the more likelihood of change. So I think there's a chance Jacksonville, Chicago, teams like that could see their odds go down. And even if you only lose 5 points, you're losing. Now, if you don't want to wait, because keep in mind, the Super Bowl wagering, you're waiting a whole season. You're waiting, 6 months, 7 months? So you might say, you know what? That's all I want to wait. I don't want to wait 9 months. So that's okay, because everybody's money matters. I get it. You don't want it tied up for 6, 7, 8, 9 months. I totally understand. Trust me, I do. Just look at it as an investment you would if you go into the stock market. That's all. Just look at it. Hey, you know what? You play the stock market, especially if you have someone that's your advisor, or anytime you play in the stock market, anybody thinks that you're going to get a quick response. I mean, you're in trouble. That's not, you play the long game in the stocks. Matter of fact, if you get something back in 7, 9 months, consider yourself very fortunate. Sometimes you get lucky. I know it can happen, but for the most part, those are investments. That's the way I think you should look at it with the Super Bowl pick. Look at it just like you would the stock market investment. That's all it is. And say, you know what? I don't have to wait 2 or 3 years. I'm just doing 7 or 9 months. That's it. So if you've got the money and it's just going to sit there in your bank account anyway, but you feel that you can make a nice investment, then by all means, go ahead and do it. Don't wait for the possibility of those odds dropping. Make the move and do it. But if you need the money, then don't worry about a few points here and there, because all that matters is winning. That's the important thing. You can, it's funny because when you're doing like horse racing, a lot of times, especially horse racing nowadays, it's so bad when it comes to the odds. They got the system, which I'm not going to get into, but it's really bad. And they've got this new technology where you could be wagering on a horse, say at 12-1 to win the race with 3 minutes to go to post. And the race has already started. and you're halfway through the race, and maybe your horse is leading, and you peek over to see what the odds are, and they're 6-1. And you're like, wait a second, 3 minutes ago they were 12-1. So again, I'm not going to go into the story of why that sucks, but the point is that we do that all the time. But in reality, peeking over and taking a look at the odds, I mean, the only reason that should matter is because if we get the win, we don't want to get our minds screwed up after the case. We want to be prepared for the potential letdown of not getting what we thought we were going to get when the race started. That's the only reason I ever look. And especially I'm a lot more alerted to the fact that you got to look now, because it happens a lot where the money can change really fast in just a couple of minutes. So, that's the thing that you're doing in football too. Now, it's not a minute or two, 2-minute horse race. It's a 7-9 minute investment in football. And so it's completely different. But the point is that look that you're getting to see how much money you're going to make is premature. Okay. Because you haven't won anything yet. So what's the most important thing? Winning. That's the most important thing. So, you know what? If you got to lose 5 points because you're just going to wait 2 months to just lose 5 points, and don't change your mind either because you lost 5 points. If you like a team, stick with it. Okay. So I think that's going to wrap it up. Let's see here. What do we got? B-Drum R, by the way, thank you very much for some of your questions and observations. And Backstreet, what are we doing here? Backstreet X Twinkie Matter 17 times season 2 scores starting to show, right? I have no idea what that means. X Twinkie Matter 17 times. Is that season 2? I don't know what that is. Scores starting to show, right? Yeah, you have to. I need a little bit more information on that. Sorry. And you got about a minute. Okay, so here's our schedule the rest of the week. We are coming back again for prime time tomorrow. Now, we don't normally do this. Normally, it is 4:00 on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. With Fridays, for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be doing our continued division by division NFL previews. Again, we're doing the AFC South this week. Normally, it's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday at 4:00, and I'll interview NFL and college football analysts, team analysts. And Tuesday is usually only prime time. But tomorrow night, we're going to have on Fred Greetham, who we've already interviewed. We did our draft recap already with Fred. That's on the site. You could check it out. But Fred's coming back tomorrow night at 8:00 to talk about the Myles Garrett trade. So when we had him on, Myles Garrett was still a Brown. So I'm going to get the perspective of what's going on with the Brown side of things. And while I have him on, I'll ask him about, hey, any updates on Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson? So we'll do that at 8:00 tomorrow night. And then Jason Sarney will be with us following, I believe, right around 8:30. Also, by the way, another NFL Wire representative, Dolphins Wire. Jason Sarney will be with us to talk about the Miami Dolphins. So again, Cleveland Browns, Miami Dolphins tomorrow night. And then that actually is all we have for the NFL this week. But next week, we're going to be talking about the Baltimore Ravens and the Arizona Cardinals. As far as our college football schedule, we have Louisville scheduled for Thursday and the MAC for Thursday. So we're doing one NFL tonight, 2 NFL tomorrow night, and 2 college football on Thursday. So Jody Demling from CardinalAuthority.com, part of the 247 Sports Network, is going to join me to talk about what's going on with the Louisville Cardinals of the ACC. And then Steve Helwick, a writer who covers a variety of topics, including the MAC. And I want to find out exactly what's going on in the MAC on Thursday. And getting Steve on at this stage is going to be very ideal because we're going to I'm going to try to pick his brain and find out like what's going on. Like who are the main teams we need to be keeping an eye on? What were the big changes for the portal? Because when we're talking a group of 5, this is where all these kids are being sent to the Power 4 schools. So what's going on? Which teams have kept their players? Which teams maybe have added portal players from, I don't know, the FCS or other group of 5 teams. So I'm going to find out what's going on with the best teams to keep an eye on in the MAC and the big changes in the MAC. So, and I'm also looking forward to do that with all the conferences in the group 5 over the next couple of months. And it's great to have one person on to talk about the whole conference. So I'm looking forward to that. That's on Thursday. And then again, more AFC South talk on Friday's show with Andy Isco. Okay, so that is going to wrap things up. Once again, thanks to Cole Thompson from the Texans Wire. I'll see you guys tomorrow night here on the Ourlads Football Network for an 8 o'clock show. If you're into other sports like golf and NASCAR or horse racing, you could check out Proline TV. That'll be part of what our show will be looking like on Friday. Both of the channels will have coverage. Proline TV, again, that's where Andy and Jim come from. So you can watch our Friday show every week on both Proline TV, right here also on the Ourlads Football Network. But on Proline TV, that's where I already did a U.S. Open preview. I did that last night. You can check that out if you're into golf. I did the NASCAR preview of the inaugural San Diego street course race. We did that earlier today on Proline TV. But no horse racing show this week. I normally do a Thursday horse racing show, but we're off, I think, for the next couple of weeks. We'll be back talking more horse racing on Proline TV, though, in a few weeks. And then, like I said, we'll see everybody on Friday on both Proline and right here on the Ourlads Football Network. So that'll wrap it up. Again, thanks a lot for tuning in here, and hope everybody has a great evening.